A woman stands alone on a frozen train platform, publicly rejected by the man who promised her everything. The entire town watches her humiliation. But when a widowed carpenter offers her shelter, nobody realizes this act of kindness will ignite a battle that forces him to choose between the ranch he's dreamed of rebuilding and the woman who brought his broken family back to life. One decision, one brutal confrontation in the snow, and a price so high it will leave the whole town speechless. This is a story about dignity, second chances, and what happens when wounded people refuse to stay broken. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The train's brakes screamed against frozen metal, sending a shower of sparks into the gray December air. Clara Whitmore pressed her forehead against the window, watching the town materialize through the steam. Wooden buildings lined up like crooked teeth, smoke rising from chimneys, and a platform crowded with people bundled against the cold. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She'd been traveling for 8 days. 8 days of rattling tracks, stale bread, and sleeping upright in her seat because she couldn't afford a berth. 8 days rehearsing what she'd say when she finally saw him. Thomas Garrett. The man who wrote her 17 letters. The man who promised her a home. The train lurched to a stop. Clara stood, smoothing wrinkles from a dress she'd washed 3 times in station bathrooms along the way. Her suitcase felt heavier than it had in Philadelphia. Everything she owned was inside it. 2 dresses, a coat her sister had mended twice, a photograph of her parents, and a small wooden box containing the letters that had convinced her to leave everything behind. The conductor opened the door. Cold air slammed into the car. "Ridgemont Station," he called. "End of the line." Clara stepped onto the platform, boots crunching against packed snow. The crowd shifted, faces turning toward her with the casual curiosity people reserve for strangers in small towns. She scanned them quickly, searching for the man from the photograph. Tall, dark hair, serious expression. She didn't see him. But then the crowd parted. A man stood near the station house wearing a heavy coat and a hat pulled low. He was watching her. For a moment, relief flooded through her chest. She started forward, pulling her suitcase. He didn't move. Clara stopped about 10 feet away. Something was wrong. His face looked different from the photograph. Harder. His mouth was set in a tight line. "Thomas?" Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. He glanced at the people around them, then back at her. "You're Clara Whitmore." It wasn't a question. "Yes." She tried to smile. I got your last letter. You said to come before Christmas, that we'd... I changed my mind." The words hit her like a physical blow. Around them, the casual chatter on the platform died. People were listening now, openly staring. Clara's throat went dry. "I don't understand." Thomas shifted his weight, looking everywhere except at her face. "I sent those letters months ago. Things change. I found someone else. Someone from here. Someone I actually know." The suitcase handle slipped from her fingers. It hit the platform with a dull thud. "You asked me to come," she whispered. "You sent money for the ticket. You said..." "I said a lot of things." His voice was flat, almost bored. "Look, I'm sorry you wasted your time, but I can't marry you. I never should have written to you in the first place. It was a mistake." Someone in the crowd laughed. A short, sharp sound quickly stifled. Clara felt her face burning despite the cold. Every eye on the platform was fixed on her. She could feel their judgment, their pity, their satisfaction at watching someone else's humiliation. "What am I supposed to do?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Thomas shrugged. "That's not my problem. There's a boarding house on Main Street. Maybe they have a room." He touched the brim of his hat in a mockery of politeness. "Good luck." He turned and walked away. Just like that. Clara stood frozen, watching him disappear into the crowd. The whispers started immediately, women leaning close to each other, men shaking their heads, voices rising and falling in speculation. Poor thing, what was she thinking? Came all this way for nothing. She must be desperate. Her chest felt like it was caving in. 8 days on a train. Every dollar she'd saved, the job she'd left, the apartment she'd given up, the friends who'd warned her this was foolish. All of it crashed down on her at once, and she couldn't breathe. "Don't cry, don't cry. Don't give them that. If..." She bent to pick up her suitcase. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped it again. The platform blurred. No. She blinked hard, forcing her vision clear. She would not cry in front of these people. Gripping the suitcase handle with both hands, Clara turned away from the tracks. She had no idea where she was going. The boarding house, maybe? If they take her. If she had enough money left. The crowd parted slowly, people stepping aside but not looking away. She walked through them with her head up, even though every step felt like moving through deep water. She made it halfway across the platform before a voice stopped her. "Miss?" Clara turned. A man stood a few yards away, separate from the crowd. He was tall, broad across the shoulders, with dark hair showing gray at the temples, and lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled less than he used to. Work clothes, a heavy canvas coat, worn boots, calloused hands. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You need somewhere to go?" he asked. The question was so unexpected that Clara couldn't answer immediately. Around them, the whispers intensified. The man's jaw tightened, but he didn't look at the crowd. "I have a room," he said. "It's clean, and I can offer you meals until you figure out what you're doing next." "I don't—" Clara's voice cracked. She cleared her throat. "I don't have much money." "Didn't ask for money." Someone in the crowd muttered something. The man's shoulders stiffened, but he kept his attention on Clara. "My name's Rowan Hale," he said. "I'm a carpenter. I live about a quarter-mile from here with my 2 children. The room was my wife's sewing room. It's been empty for 2 years. You're welcome to it." Clara stared at him. Nothing about this made sense. Strangers didn't offer help, especially not to women who'd just been publicly humiliated. "Why would you do that?" she asked. Rowan's expression didn't change. "Because nobody else is going to." The simple honesty of it hit her harder than Thomas's rejection. She looked at this man, this stranger, and saw something in his face that she recognized. Exhaustion, the kind that came from carrying too much for too long. "I don't want charity," she said quietly. "Then help around the house," Rowan replied. "Cook if you know how. Keep the place clean. Watch the kids when I'm working. That's fair trade for room and board." It was more than fair. It was generous to the point of being suspicious, but Clara was out of options, and they both knew it. She nodded. "All right." Rowan picked up her suitcase before she could protest. "This way." They walked off the platform together, through the staring crowd and onto the main street. Clara kept her eyes forward, refusing to look at anyone. Behind them, the whispers erupted into full conversations. Rowan Hale taking in a stranger? That woman's got some nerve. Wonder what his children will think. This won't end well. Clara heard every word. She suspected Rowan did too, from the set of his shoulders. But neither of them acknowledged it. They walked in silence through the town. Ridgemont was smaller than Clara had expected. One main street with shops and businesses, a few side streets with houses, everything surrounded by dense pine forest and snow-covered hills. The buildings looked tired, paint peeling and wood-weathered gray. It was the kind of place people came to work, not to stay. Rowan's cabin appeared at the edge of town, where the road turned to dirt and trees pressed in close. It was simple. Log construction, a stone chimney, a small porch. Smoke rose from the chimney in a thin gray line. Rowan climbed the porch steps and opened the door. "Eli? Nora? We have a guest." Clara stepped inside. The interior was dim and cluttered in the way of houses where people lived but didn't have time to care. Dishes stacked in the sink, boots scattered by the door, a coat thrown over a chair instead of hung up. But it was warm, heat radiating from a potbelly stove in the corner, and it smelled like wood smoke and coffee. 2 children stood near the kitchen table. The boy was about 12, all angles and suspicion. He had his father's dark hair and a mouth that looked like it forgot how to smile. The girl was younger, maybe 6, with tangled blonde hair and enormous eyes that fixed on Clara with immediate curiosity. "This is Clara Whitmore," Rowan said, setting down the suitcase. "She's going to stay with us for a while. Clara, this is Eli and Nora." Eli's expression went carefully blank. "Where's she sleeping?" "Your mother's sewing room." Something flashed across the boy's face. Anger, maybe, or grief. It was gone too quickly for Clara to be sure. Nora, meanwhile, had edged closer. "Are you going to live here forever?" "Nora," Rowan's voice held a warning. "I'm just staying temporarily," Clara said, trying to keep her voice gentle. until I figure out my next step. The little girl considered this. Do you know how to make pancakes? Despite everything, Clara almost smiled. I do. Papa burns them. I do not burn them, Rowan protested. They're just crispy. They're black, Eli muttered. It was the most normal exchange Clara had heard all day. Something in her chest loosened slightly. Rowan showed her to the sewing room, a small space with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the forest. The bed was made, but everything else had a layer of dust that spoke of long neglect. I'll leave you to settle in, Rowan said from the doorway. Supper's in an hour. Nothing fancy. Thank you. Clara turned to face him. I mean it. You didn't have to do this. Rowan looked at her for a long moment. We've all needed help at some point, he said finally. The difference is whether anyone offers it. He left, closing the door behind him. Clara sat on the bed and stared at her suitcase. The weight of the day crashed down all at once. 8 days on a train. Public humiliation. Now she was in a stranger's house, in a town where she knew no one, dependent on the charity of a widowed carpenter with 2 children who looked at her like she was a puzzle they didn't want to solve. This wasn't the future she'd imagined, but it was the one she had. She opened her suitcase and started unpacking. Supper was quiet. Rowan served something that might have been stew once, but had been sitting on the stove too long. The vegetables were mushy, the meat tough, but Clara ate every bite without complaint. Eli picked at his food and said nothing. Nora chattered about a squirrel she'd seen outside until her father gently told her to eat. Clara washed the dishes afterward without being asked. The kitchen was a disaster. Crusty pots, a floor that needed sweeping, counters sticky with spilled things. She cleaned what she could while Rowan put the children to bed. When he came back downstairs, she was wiping down the table. You don't have to do that tonight, he said. I don't mind. Clara wrung out the rag. You've given me a place to stay. This is the least I can do. Rowan pulled out a chair and sat, fatigue showing in the way his shoulders slumped. The town's going to talk, he said bluntly, about you being here, about me taking you in. It won't be kind. Clara set down the rag. I'm used to that. Still, you should know what you're walking into. She sat across from him. Why did you offer to help me? Rowan was quiet for a moment, fingers tracing the grain of the wooden table. 2 years ago, my wife got sick, fever. She was gone in 3 days. The whole town showed up for the funeral. They brought food, offered prayers, said all the right things. He paused. Then they left, he continued, and I had 2 kids who stopped talking, a business barely keeping itself together, and no idea how to do any of it. People would ask how I was doing. I'd say fine, because that's what you say. But I wasn't fine, and nobody pushed past that word to actually help. Clara understood. She'd lived that version of loneliness herself. When I saw you on that platform, Rowan said, all I could think was, here's someone who needs help, and everyone's just watching, like it's entertainment. He met her eyes. I'm tired of watching. The honesty in his voice made Clara's throat tight. Your children don't want me here, she said quietly. They don't know what they want. They've been surviving, not living. Maybe you being here will change that. Maybe it won't. But either way, you've got a place to stay as long as you need it. It was more grace than Clara had received in years. Thank you, she whispered. Rowan stood. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be easier. It wasn't, though. The next morning, Clara woke to find Nora sitting on the floor outside her door, playing with a rag doll that had seen better days. The girl looked up when Clara emerged. Papa's already working, Nora announced. Eli's supposed to watch me, but he's reading. Clara found Eli in the main room, sprawled on a chair with a battered book. He glanced up when she entered, then deliberately looked back down. Your father left you in charge of your sister? Clara asked. She's fine. She's 6. Eli turned a page. She knows not to do anything stupid. Clara counted to 5 in her head. What would you normally have for breakfast? Whatever we can find. She checked the kitchen. There was flour, some eggs that might still be good, a bit of milk. The pantry was depressing, mostly empty jars and a sack of potatoes going soft. Clara rolled up her sleeves and got to work. An hour later, she'd produced pancakes, scrambled eggs, and something resembling breakfast. She called the children to the table. Nora came running immediately. Eli took his time, but he came. They ate in silence. Nora demolished her food with enthusiasm. Eli ate more slowly, but he cleaned his plate. Papa never makes this much food, Nora said, mouth full. Don't talk with your mouth full, Clara said automatically. Nora swallowed. Why not? Because it's not polite. Papa doesn't care. Clara looked at Eli, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Your father has a lot on his mind, she said carefully. Sometimes things slip. Mama used to care about that stuff, Nora said, suddenly serious. She said manners mattered. The room went very quiet. Eli stood abruptly. I'm going out. Your father said, Clara started. I don't care what he said. Eli grabbed his coat. You're not my mother. You don't get to tell me what to do. He slammed the door behind him. Nora looked at Clara with wide eyes. He's always like that. It's all right, Clara said, though her hands were shaking slightly. He's angry. He has a right to be. Are you angry? The question caught Clara off guard. She looked at this little girl with tangled hair and a dirty dress and felt something crack open in her chest. Sometimes, Clara admitted, but not at you. Nora considered this. Then she climbed down from her chair and disappeared into another room. She came back carrying a brush. Can you fix my hair? She asked. Eli tries, but he pulls too hard. Clara took the brush. Come here. Nora sat on the floor between Clara's knees, and Clara began working through the tangles. The girl winced a few times, but didn't complain. Slowly, carefully, Clara brushed until Nora's hair lay smooth and golden down her back. There, Clara said softly. Beautiful. Nora touched her hair wonderingly. Then she turned and wrapped her arms around Clara's legs in a sudden, fierce hug. Clara froze. The little girl held on for a long moment before letting go and running off to play. Clara sat in the quiet kitchen, staring at her shaking hands, and tried not to think about how much that small gesture had meant. The days developed a rhythm. Rowan left early to work on whatever carpentry jobs he could find. Clara took care of the house, cooking, cleaning, mending clothes that had been neglected too long. Nora followed her everywhere, chattering constantly and helping in the way 6-year-olds help, which is to say, she mostly got in the way. Eli disappeared for hours at a time, coming back silent and defensive. Clara learned the house's patterns, the leak in the roof above the pantry, the way the front door stuck unless you lifted it while turning the handle, which floorboards creaked, where Rowan kept his tools, the children's routines and habits. She also learned the town. The first time she walked to the general store, conversation stopped when she entered. Women looked her over with expressions ranging from pity to disdain. The shopkeeper was polite but distant, taking her money without meeting her eyes. On her way out, she heard someone mutter, "Living in that house, shameless." Clara kept walking. It happened everywhere. At the butcher shop, the post office, walking down the street. People stared, they whispered, they made their judgments clear. Clara endured it because she had no choice. But it wore on her. One afternoon, she returned to the cabin to find Nora crying on the porch steps. The little girl's dress was torn, her face streaked with tears. Clara dropped the basket she was carrying and knelt. What happened? The girls at school, Nora sobbed. They said mean things. They said you're a bad lady and Papa's stupid for letting you stay. White-hot anger flooded through Clara. She pulled Nora close. Listen to me. What they said isn't true. You understand? Nora nodded against her shoulder. Some people are cruel because they're unhappy, Clara said quietly. And they try to make everyone else unhappy too, but you don't have to listen to them. But what if they're right? Clara pulled back to look at Nora's face. Do you think I'm a bad person? Nora shook her head vehemently. Then that's what matters. Clara wiped the tears from Nora's cheeks. Now let's fix this dress before your father sees it. They were sitting on the porch, Clara stitching the torn fabric, when Eli came around the corner. He stopped short, seeing his sister's blotchy face. What happened? His voice was sharp. Nothing, Nora said quickly. Eli looked at Clara. What happened? Clara finished the stitch before answering. Some children at school said unkind things. It's handled. What did they say? It doesn't matter. Yes, it does. Eli's hands were clenched into fists. Was it about you being here? Clara met his eyes. Yes. For a moment she thought he might say something cruel himself. might agree with those children, might tell her this was all her fault. Instead, he turned and walked away. But not toward the woods, toward town. Clara's stomach dropped. Eli, wait! He didn't stop. She looked at Nora. Stay here. Then she ran after him. By the time Clara caught up, Eli was standing in front of the schoolhouse, confronting a group of older children. Clara couldn't hear what was being said, but the body language was clear. The other kids were laughing. Eli's entire frame was rigid with anger. Then one of the boys shoved him. Eli swung. Clara reached them as chaos erupted, children yelling, fists flying, bodies hitting the ground. She grabbed Eli's arm and pulled him back with strength she didn't know she had. That's enough! Eli struggled against her grip. Let go. No, Clara held on. This isn't helping. They called you a whore. The word hung in the air. The other children went silent. Clara felt like she'd been slapped, but she didn't let go of Eli. Come on, she said quietly. We're going home. She half dragged him away from the schoolhouse. He fought her for the first block, then went limp with exhaustion. They walked back in heavy silence. At the cabin, Clara sat him down and checked his face. His lip was split, and a bruise was already forming under his eye. You're going to have a shiner, she said. I don't care. Clara got a cloth and dampened it. This is going to sting. He flinched when she pressed it to his lip, but didn't pull away. I didn't ask you to defend me, Clara said. I know. Then why did you? Eli was quiet for a long time. Because they were wrong, he said finally. You're not what they said. You're not like that. Something in Clara's chest broke open. She cupped Eli's bruised face gently. Thank you, she whispered. But you can't fight every person who says something cruel. You'll spend your whole life fighting. Then what am I supposed to do? Survive it, like I do. Eli looked at her with eyes too old for his age. That's a terrible answer. Clara almost laughed. I know. When Rowan came home an hour later and saw Eli's face, his expression went dark. But before he could say anything, Eli spoke. I started it, he said. Clara tried to stop me. It's not her fault. Rowan looked between them. What happened? Eli told him. The children at school, the insults, the fight. Rowan listened without interrupting. When Eli finished, Rowan sighed. Go clean up for supper. After Eli left, Rowan turned to Clara. I'm sorry, he said. I knew there'd be talk, but I didn't think... It's not your responsibility to protect me from people's opinions, Clara interrupted. Maybe not. But it is my responsibility to make sure my children understand what's right. He paused. Eli stood up for you. That tells me something. It tells me he's going to get hurt defending someone who isn't worth it. Don't say that. The sharpness in his voice startled her. Rowan stepped closer. You've been here 2 weeks. In that time, this house has felt more like a home than it has in 2 years. My children are eating regular meals. The place is clean. Nora laughs again. And Eli... He shook his head. Eli hasn't cared about anything in so long. I'd forgotten what it looked like when he did. Clara couldn't meet his eyes. You're worth defending, Rowan said quietly. Don't ever think otherwise. He left her standing in the kitchen, trying to remember the last time anyone had said something like that to her. Winter deepened. Snow piled higher. The temperature dropped. The cabin felt smaller, everyone pressed together by necessity and proximity. Clara settled into the strange reality of her situation. She wasn't family, but she wasn't a stranger anymore either. She existed in the space between useful but temporary, needed but not quite belonging. Except slowly, in ways she couldn't name, that was changing. Nora started calling her Miss Clara instead of just her name. The girl would climb into Clara's lap in the evenings, asking for stories or just sitting quietly while Clara mended clothes. Eli thawed more slowly, but he thawed. He started helping with chores without being asked. Brought in extra firewood, fixed things around the house that had been broken for months. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes, he'd sit at the kitchen table while Clara cooked and just talk. About school, about his mother, about the ranch his father used to dream about. He wanted to rebuild it, Eli said one afternoon, before Mama died. He had plans, drawings. He was going to raise horses. What stopped him? Clara asked. Eli shrugged. Everything costs money, and after Mama, he just gave up, I guess. Sold off everything except the cabin and a few acres. Said it was more practical. Clara heard what he didn't say. Practical meant without hope. Rowan himself was harder to read. He worked long hours, came home exhausted, and spent his evenings in quiet companionship that felt comfortable but undefined. Sometimes Clara would catch him watching her when she was braiding Nora's hair or laughing at something Eli said, or just moving around the kitchen. He'd look away quickly, but not before she saw something in his expression she couldn't interpret. One night, Clara woke to sounds from the main room. She pulled on her robe and found Rowan sitting by the stove, staring into the embers. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked softly. He looked up, startled. "Didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't." Clara sat in the chair across from him. "What's wrong?" Rowan was quiet for a long time. "It's been 2 years," he said finally. 2 years since Anne died. And most days I'm fine. I get up, I work, I take care of the kids. I function." He paused. "But then there are nights like this where I just—" He stopped, shaking his head. "I miss her. I miss having someone to talk to. Someone who understood the weight of all this." Clara's throat tightened. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." Rowan looked at her. "Having you here has helped. More than you know. The kids are happier. The house feels alive again. But it also reminds me of everything we lost, everything I couldn't save." The rawness in his voice made Clara's chest ache. "You can't save everyone," she said quietly. "Sometimes you can barely save yourself." Rowan studied her face. "Is that what you're doing? Saving yourself?" Clara considered lying, but something about the late hour and the dim light made honesty feel necessary. "I don't know what I am doing," she admitted. "I came here believing in a future that turned out to be a lie. And now I'm living in someone else's house, taking care of someone else's children, and pretending this is temporary when I have nowhere else to go." "Do you want to leave?" The question startled her. "No," Clara said, and meant it. "But I can't stay forever." "Why not?" "Because this wasn't her family. Because she was an outsider. Because eventually Rowan would meet someone else, someone appropriate, and Clara would have to leave anyway. But she didn't say any of that." "It wouldn't be fair to you," she said instead. Rowan leaned forward. "What if I told you I don't want you to leave? What if I said having you here is the best thing that's happened to this family in 2 years? Clara's heart was pounding. "Rowan—" "I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I'm just saying you have a place here, for as long as you want it." They sat in silence, the weight of unspoken things hanging between them. Finally, Clara stood. "Get some sleep," she said softly. "Tomorrow's another day." As she walked back to her room, she heard Rowan whisper behind her, "Thank you, Clara." She closed her door and leaned against it, trying to calm her racing thoughts. This was dangerous territory. She was already too attached to these children, too comfortable in this house, too aware of the man who'd given her shelter when nobody else would. But she couldn't make herself regret it. Not anymore. Spring was still weeks away when everything changed. Clara was at the general store buying supplies when she felt eyes on her. She turned to find a woman staring, well-dressed, blonde hair, pinned elaborately, the kind of woman who commanded attention. The woman approached. "You're Clara Whitmore." It wasn't a question. "Yes," Clara said warily. "I'm Margaret Garrett." The woman's smile was cold. "Thomas's wife." The bottom dropped out of Clara's stomach. Margaret looked her over slowly, deliberately. "I wanted to see for myself what kind of woman throws herself at a promised man, what kind of woman has so little dignity." Every person in the store had gone silent. Clara forced herself to stay calm. "If you'll excuse me, Thomas told me all about you," Margaret continued. "How desperate you were, how pathetic, coming all this way for a man who never really wanted you." The words were designed to wound. They did. But Clara had survived worse. "Your husband is the one who invited me," Clara said quietly. "Perhaps you should have this conversation with him." Margaret's expression hardened. "Stay away from my husband. If I see you anywhere near him—" "I have no interest in your husband," Clara interrupted. "I assure you, he made his feelings perfectly clear." She pushed past Margaret and walked out of the store, head high, ignoring the stares and whispers that erupted behind her. But her hands were shaking. She made it 3 blocks before she had to stop, leaning against a building to catch her breath. The humiliation felt fresh all over again. The rejection, the shame, the reminder that in this town she would always be the woman who got left on the platform. "Miss Clara?" Clara looked up to find Nora standing there with Eli behind her. The children must have been coming from school. "Are you all right?" Eli asked, concerned. Clara straightened quickly. "I'm fine, just needed a moment." But Nora had already noticed her shaking hands. The little girl reached out and took one, holding it tightly. "Someone was mean to you," Nora said with 6-year-old certainty. Clara managed a weak smile. "Nothing I can't handle." Eli's jaw tightened. He looked toward the general store, then back at Clara. "Was it her? Margaret Garrett?" "It doesn't matter." "Yes, it does." Eli's voice was fierce. "She has no right." "Eli." Clara squeezed Nora's hand gently. "Let it go." But she could see him filing this away, adding it to his growing list of grievances against the town. They walked home together, Nora chattering about school while Eli stayed quiet and watchful. Clara tried to shake off the encounter, but Margaret's words kept echoing. Desperate, pathetic. Never really wanted you. That night at supper, Rowan noticed her distraction immediately. "What happened?" he asked after the children had gone to bed. Clara considered lying again, but she was tired of pretending. "I met Margaret Garrett today," she said. "Thomas's wife. She made her feelings about my presence in this town very clear." Rowan's expression darkened. "What did she say?" "Nothing I haven't heard before." Clara stood to clear the dishes. "It doesn't matter." "Clara." Rowan caught her wrist gently. "It matters to me." She looked at his hand on her arm, at the calluses and scars from years of carpentry work, and felt something shift inside her. "I'm tired," she admitted. "I'm tired of being judged for something that wasn't even my fault. I'm tired of people treating me like I'm shameful. I'm tired of—" Her voice cracked. "I'm just tired." Rowan stood, still holding her wrist. "Then stay," he said quietly. "Stop thinking about what other people want and think about what you want." "I don't know what I want." "Yes, you do." His thumb brushed across her pulse point. "You're just afraid to admit it." The air between them felt charged, dangerous. Clara pulled her hand back carefully. "I should go to bed." She left him standing in the kitchen and closed herself in her room, heart pounding, because he was right. She did know what she wanted. She wanted to stay in this house with these children and this man who looked at her like she mattered. She wanted to stop feeling like a temporary guest and start feeling like she belonged. She wanted a future that wasn't defined by the man who rejected her. But wanting something and having the right to want it were different things. And Clara had learned long ago that wanting was dangerous. Still, that night, she lay awake and let herself imagine a different future. One where she stayed, where the children called her something other than Miss Clara, where Rowan's careful touches meant something more than kindness. It was a dangerous dream. But for the first time in a very long time, Clara let herself dream it anyway. The dream ended 3 days later when Clara found Nora sitting on the kitchen floor, crying into her hands. It was early morning. Rowan had already left for a job 2 towns over. Eli was still asleep. Clara had come downstairs to start breakfast and found the little girl huddled against the cabinet, shoulders shaking. Clara dropped to her knees beside her. "Nora? What's wrong? Are you hurt?" Nora shook her head but wouldn't look up. "Talk to me, sweetheart." The word slipped out before Clara could stop it. She'd never called Nora that before. Never let herself cross that line. Nora's crying intensified. "I had a bad dream." Clara's heart clenched. "About what?" "You left." Nora's voice was muffled against her hands. "You were gone, and Papa said you weren't coming back, and I woke up and I couldn't remember what you looked like." Clara pulled the girl into her arms, holding her tight. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." "Promise?" The word hung between them, weighted with too much meaning. Clara wanted to promise, wanted to say she'd never leave, that this was home now, that Nora would never have to worry about losing someone else. But she couldn't make that promise, not honestly. "I'm here now," Clara said instead. "That's what matters." It wasn't enough. She could feel it in the way Nora clung to her, in the quiet desperation of a child who'd already lost one mother and knew how easily people disappeared. Eli appeared in the doorway, hair sticking up, eyes still heavy with sleep. He took in the scene, Nora crying, Clara holding her, and his expression shuddered. What happened? His voice was flat. Bad dream, Clara said quietly. Eli looked at his sister, then at Clara. Something flickered across his face. She gets those sometimes. About Mama. This one was about me. The admission made Eli go very still. He stared at Clara like he was trying to solve a problem that didn't have an answer. You should get ready for school, Clara said when the silence stretched too long. Both of you. I'll make breakfast. She cooked mechanically, her mind elsewhere. Nora sat at the table, unusually quiet. Eli moved around the kitchen with deliberate distance, not looking at either of them. They ate in silence. Afterward, when the children had left for school and the cabin was empty, Clara stood at the kitchen window and stared out at the forest. The trees were still bare, waiting for spring. Everything felt suspended, caught between what was and what might be. She was washing dishes when she heard boots on the porch. Too early for Rowan to be back. Clara dried her hands and opened the door. Thomas Garrett stood on her porch. Clara's stomach dropped. What are you doing here? He looked different than he had on the platform. Nervous. Guilty. I need to talk to you. We have nothing to talk about. Please. He glanced toward town. Just 5 minutes. Every instinct told her to slam the door in his face. But curiosity won. Talk. Thomas shifted his weight. Margaret's pregnant. She's been having complications. The doctor says she needs to rest, but she won't. She's obsessed with... He stopped. With you. That's not my problem. I know. I know it's not. Thomas ran a hand through his hair. But she won't let it go. She keeps talking about you, about how you're trying to ruin our marriage, how you're probably scheming to get me back. Clara laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You think I want you back? No, but Margaret does, and she's making herself sick over it. Again, Clara said coldly, not my problem. Thomas's jaw tightened. I'm asking you to leave town. Go somewhere else. Start over somewhere that isn't here. The audacity of it took Clara's breath away. You invited me here. You rejected me publicly, and now you want me to leave because your wife is upset? I'll pay for your ticket anywhere you want to go. I'll even give you extra to get settled. Get off this porch. Clara, get off this porch. Her voice shook with rage. Before I make you. Thomas stepped back, hands raised. I'm trying to do the right thing. You abandoned me in a strange town with no money and no prospects. You humiliated me in front of everyone. And now you have the nerve to ask me to leave because your wife can't handle her own insecurity? Clara's hands were clenched into fists. You've done enough. Stay away from me. Stay away from this house. If I see you near here again, I'll tell everyone in town exactly what kind of man you are. They already know what kind of woman you are, Thomas shot back, anger finally breaking through. Living here, with him. Everyone knows what you're doing. Clara slammed the door in his face. She stood there, shaking, listening to his footsteps retreat. Then she sank down against the door and tried to breathe. This was never going to end. The judgment, the whispers, the assumption that she was something shameful. No matter what she did, no matter how carefully she lived, this town had already decided who she was. Clara was still sitting there when Rowan came home hours later. He took one look at her face and set down his tools. What happened? She told him everything. Thomas's visit, the demand that she leave, the implications about her character. Rowan's expression went dark. He came here? To my house? It doesn't matter. The hell it doesn't. Rowan grabbed his coat. Clara stood quickly. Where are you going? To have a conversation with Thomas Garrett. No. Clara caught his arm. Don't. It'll just make things worse. Worse than him showing up here and threatening you? He didn't threaten me. He just... Clara stopped. He reminded me that I don't belong here. Rowan turned to face her fully. Is that what you think? That you don't belong here? I don't know what I think anymore. He was standing too close. Clara could see the muscle jumping in his jaw, the frustration in his eyes. You belong here, Rowan said quietly, in this house, with us. And anyone who says different can answer to me. You can't fight the whole town. Watch me. The intensity in his voice made Clara's breath catch. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then Rowan stepped back. I need to pick up the kids from school. He left without another word. Clara sank into a chair and put her head in her hands. Everything was spiraling. She'd come here with nothing, built something fragile and temporary, and now it was all threatening to collapse. When Rowan returned with the children, Nora ran straight to Clara and wrapped her arms around her waist. "You're still here," the girl said, relief clear in her voice. "Of course I'm still here." Eli hung back, watching, always watching. That night at supper, the tension was thick enough to cut. Nobody talked. Nora pushed her food around her plate. Eli ate quickly and excused himself. Rowan barely touched his meal. After the children went to bed, Clara started cleaning up. Rowan stopped her. "Leave it," he said. "Sit down. We need to talk." Clara's heart sank. This was it. He was going to ask her to leave, tell her that the situation had become too complicated, that his children were getting too attached, that the town's judgment was affecting his business. She sat. Rowan sat across from her, fingers laced together on the table. "I've been thinking about what you said, about not belonging." "Rowan, let me finish." He took a breath. "When Anne died, I stopped thinking about the future. I just survived. Day to day, that's all I could manage. The kids needed me, so I got up. I worked. I came home. But I wasn't really living." Clara stayed quiet. "Then you showed up," Rowan continued. "And suddenly the house felt different. The kids were different. I was different. For the first time in 2 years, I could see past tomorrow." "Where's this going?" Clara asked softly. Rowan met her eyes. "I'm saying I don't want you to feel like you don't belong. Because you do. Not as a guest. Not as someone who's just passing through." The air felt too thin. "What are you asking me?" Clara whispered. "I'm not asking anything. Not yet." Rowan's voice was careful. "But I need you to know that if you want to stay permanently, there's a place for you here, as part of this family." Clara's throat closed up. The town would never accept that. "I don't care what the town accepts. Your children, my children need stability. They need someone who cares about them. They need you." "They need a mother," Clara said, "not a stranger who showed up 3 months ago." "You stopped being a stranger weeks ago." Rowan leaned forward. "Nora follows you everywhere." She smiles again. She laughs. "And Eli, he defends you. He fights for you. He hasn't cared about anything in so long, Clara, but he cares about you." Tears burned behind Clara's eyes. "I can't replace their mother." "I'm not asking you to replace anyone. I'm asking if you want to build something new." The weight of it pressed down on Clara's chest. This man was offering her everything she'd dreamed about during those long nights alone in her room. A home, a family, a future. But she'd learned the hard way that dreams could turn into nightmares. "I need time to think," she said finally. Rowan nodded. "Take all the time you need." But time wasn't the problem. The problem was that Clara already knew what she wanted. She was just terrified to reach for it. The next week passed in a strange limbo. Clara went through the motions, cooking, cleaning, caring for the children, but everything felt different now, weighted with possibility and fear. Nora seemed to sense the shift. She became clingy, following Clara from room to room, asking questions that had no good answers. "Are you going to stay forever?" she asked one afternoon while Clara was folding laundry. "I don't know, sweetheart. But you want to, right?" Clara looked at this little girl with tangled blonde hair and enormous eyes, and her heart broke a little. "It's complicated. That's what Papa says when he doesn't want to tell me something." Despite everything, Clara smiled. "Your father is a smart man." "He likes you," Nora said matter-of-factly. "I can tell." "Nora, he looks at you different than he looks at other ladies, and he smiles more when you're here." Clara set down the shirt she was folding. "Have there been other ladies?" "No, that's why it's special." Nora climbed onto the bed beside the laundry pile. "I think he wants you to be my new mama." The casual way she said it nearly undid Clara completely. "Your papa hasn't said anything like that," Clara managed. "He will." Nora picked up a sock and tried to fold it. "And when he does, you should say yes." "Why?" Nora looked at her like the answer was obvious. "Because we need you, and I think you need us too." Out of the mouths of children. Clara pulled Nora into a hug, blinking back tears.
You're very wise for 6 years old. I know, Nora said seriously.
That night, Clara lay awake trying to sort through her tangled thoughts. She wanted to stay. She wanted this family. But wanting something didn't make it right. What if she stayed and it didn't work? What if the children grew to resent her? What if Rowan realized he'd made a mistake? What if... A soft knock on her door interrupted the spiral. Clara? Eli's voice. You awake? She opened the door. Eli stood in the hallway, barefoot and uncertain. Can I talk to you? He asked. Of course. Come in. Eli sat on the edge of her bed, hands clasped between his knees. Clara pulled her robe tighter and sat in the chair by the window. I heard Papa talking to you, Eli said. Last week, about you staying. Clara's heart sank. Eli, I know I haven't been nice to you. When you first got here, I mean. I was awful. You were grieving. I was scared. Eli looked up, and Clara saw fear naked in his face. Scared that if I let myself like you, you'd leave. Like Mama left. Like everyone leaves. Clara moved to sit beside him. Your mother didn't want to leave you. I know. But she did anyway. And then you showed up and Nora liked you right away. But I kept waiting for you to disappoint us. To prove that getting attached was stupid. Eli's voice cracked. But you never did. You just stayed. And now I'm more scared than I was before. Scared of what? That you'll leave now. That something will happen and you'll go away and it'll hurt worse because I let myself care. Clara's throat tightened. I can't promise nothing will ever happen. Life doesn't work that way. But you could promise to try, to want to stay. It was a simple request, and terrifying in its honesty. Clara took Eli's hand. I want to stay, she said quietly. I want to be here with you and Nora and your father. I'm just scared too. Of what? That I'm not enough, that I'll let you down, that I'm making a mistake. Eli squeezed her hand. You're already enough. You've been enough since the day you got here. You just have to decide to believe it. When had this 12-year-old boy become so wise? Clara pulled him into a hug. Eli resisted for half a second, then hugged her back fiercely. I don't want you to go, he whispered. I don't want to go either. They stayed like that for a long moment. When Eli finally pulled back, his eyes were red, but his expression was clearer. You should tell Papa, he said. Tell him what? That you're staying. He's been walking around like he's waiting for bad news. It's annoying. Clara laughed despite herself. I'll talk to him. Good. Eli stood. And Clara, for what it's worth, I think you'd make a good mom. He left before she could respond. Clara sat in the dark, tears streaming down her face, and let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. Fear, hope, love for these children who'd somehow become hers without her noticing, and something deeper, more complicated, for the man who'd given her a second chance when nobody else would. She'd spent so long protecting herself from disappointment that she'd forgotten how to let people in. But these three people, Rowan, Eli, Nora, had slipped past her defenses anyway. The question wasn't whether she wanted to stay. The question was whether she was brave enough to try. Clara got up and looked at herself in the small mirror above the dresser. She looked tired, older than her 26 years, but there was something different in her eyes. Hope. She was going to do it. She was going to tell Rowan yes, tomorrow. She'd tell him tomorrow. But tomorrow came with its own problems. Clara was at the general store when she overheard two women talking. Did you hear? Margaret Garrett lost the baby. Clara's blood went cold. No, when? Last night. She's devastated, poor thing. Thomas is beside himself. I heard she'd been making herself sick, obsessing over that woman living with Rowan Hale. Well, maybe now she'll have peace, though I can't imagine losing a child like that. Clara left without buying anything. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely walk straight. This wasn't her fault. She knew it wasn't her fault. But the town wouldn't see it that way. They'd say her presence had stressed Margaret, that she'd caused this somehow. She made it halfway home before she ran into Thomas. He looked destroyed, unshaven, eyes red. When he saw her, something in his expression hardened. You, he said. Clara stopped. I'm sorry about Margaret, about the baby. Sorry, Thomas laughed, a broken, bitter sound. You're sorry, like that means anything. Thomas, she was obsessed with you, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. The doctor said she needed to rest, but she couldn't stop thinking about you being here, about people talking, about... His voice broke. And now my baby is dead. People were starting to notice, starting to watch. I never wanted any of this, Clara said quietly. But you got it anyway, didn't you? You got a nice house, a ready-made family, while my wife is at home grieving. That's not fair. Fair? Thomas stepped closer. You want to talk about fair? I made a mistake writing to you. I admit that. But you could have left. You could have gone anywhere. Instead, you stayed here, rubbing it in everyone's face, playing house with Rowan Hale while my wife fell apart. Clara felt like she'd been slapped. I'm not responsible for your marriage. You're responsible for this. Thomas's voice rose. Margaret would still be pregnant if you'd left when I asked. Our baby would still be alive. The accusation hung in the air. Clara saw the crowd forming, saw the way people were looking at her, judging, blaming. I'm sorry for your loss, she said again, voice shaking, but I didn't cause it. She walked away before he could respond, before the tears could fall, before she completely fell apart. By the time she reached the cabin, the story had already spread. Rowan was waiting on the porch. One look at his face told her he'd heard. It's not true, Clara said immediately. Whatever they're saying, I know it's not true. Rowan came down the steps. But the town doesn't care about truth. They're going to blame me. Let them. Rowan, this is serious. Your business? I don't care about my business. He gripped her shoulders. I care about you, and I care about my children. Everything else can go to hell. Clara shook her head. You can't mean that. I've never meant anything more. But even as he said it, Clara could see the worry in his eyes, because they both knew how this worked. Small towns had long memories and short tempers. This wouldn't blow over. That night, someone threw a rock through the cabin window. It happened after midnight. The crash of breaking glass woke everyone. Clara ran out to find Rowan and Eli in the main room, staring at the shattered window and the rock on the floor. Nora appeared in her nightgown, eyes wide with fear. What happened? Nothing, baby. Rowan scooped her up. Go back to bed. But now, Nora. Eli took his sister back to her room while Rowan examined the window. This is my fault, Clara said. Rowan picked up the rock. There was a piece of paper wrapped around it, held with string. He untied it and read. His expression went cold. What does it say? Clara asked. Rowan crumpled the paper. Nothing worth repeating. Show me. No. Rowan. He threw the paper in the fire before she could grab it. They both watched it burn. They want me gone, Clara said quietly. They don't get a vote. Someone just threw a rock through your window. What happens when it escalates? Rowan looked at her. Are you saying you want to leave? Did she? It would be easier, safer. She could disappear, find another town, start over somewhere nobody knew her story. But then she thought about Nora's face when she woke from nightmares, about Eli finally opening up, about the way Rowan looked at her like she mattered. No, Clara said, I don't want to leave. Then we deal with it. But dealing with it proved harder than either of them expected. The next day, Rowan's biggest client canceled a job. The day after that, another client followed. The store started refusing to extend credit. People crossed the street to avoid them. Eli came home with a black eye. Nora stopped eating, and Clara watched the family she loved suffer because of her. 1 week after the rock through the window, Clara made a decision. She waited until the children were asleep and Rowan was working in his shop. Then she packed her suitcase. She'd made it to the front door when Eli's voice stopped her. You're leaving. Clara turned. Eli stood at the bottom of the stairs, face pale. It's better this way, Clara said. Better for who? For everyone. Your father's losing his business. You're getting in fights. Nora won't eat. This is killing all of you. Eli's hands clenched into fists. You promised you wanted to stay. I do. But wanting something and having the right to it are different things. That's a coward's answer. The word stung because it was true. Maybe it is, Clara said. But I'm trying to protect you. We don't need protection. We need you. Eli's voice cracked. Don't you get that? We've already lost one mother. If you leave now... He couldn't finish. Clara dropped the suitcase and pulled him into a hug. Eli fought it for a second, then collapsed against her, shaking. "I'm scared," he whispered. "Me too." "Then why are you running?" Because running was easier than fighting. Because Clara had spent her whole life learning to survive by knowing when to leave. Because staying meant risking everything, and she'd never been brave enough for that. But looking at this boy, this brave, wounded boy who'd somehow become hers, Clara realized something. She was tired of running. "I'm not leaving," she said. Eli pulled back. "Promise?" "I promise." The relief on his face nearly broke her. They stood there in the dark hallway, Clara holding this child who'd lost too much already, and she felt something shift inside her. She'd spent months being afraid of hoping, afraid of wanting, afraid of reaching for something that might disappear. But fear was just another kind of prison, and Clara was done living behind bars. "Go back to bed," she told Eli gently. "Everything's going to be all right." She didn't know if that was true, but she was going to fight like hell to make it true. After Eli went upstairs, Clara unpacked her suitcase and walked out to Rowan's workshop. He was sanding a piece of wood, shoulders tense. He looked up when she entered. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "I almost left tonight." Rowan went very still. "Almost?" Eli stopped me. Clara moved closer. "He reminded me that running doesn't solve anything." "What changed your mind?" "I did." Clara took a breath. "I've spent my whole life being afraid of hoping for things. But I'm done being afraid. I want to stay. I want to be part of this family. And I don't care what the town thinks about it." Rowan set down his tools. "You sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." He crossed the space between them and cupped her face in his rough hands. "This won't be easy." "Nothing worth having ever is." Rowan smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "Then I guess we fight." "Together," Clara said. "Together." He kissed her then, gentle and careful, like she was something precious. Clara leaned into him, and let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. When they finally pulled apart, Rowan rested his forehead against hers. "I'm glad you stayed," he whispered. "So am I." They stood in the quiet workshop, holding each other, while outside the wind picked up and rattled the windows. The battle wasn't over. But for the first time, Clara believed they might actually win it. Fighting, it turned out, meant watching everything get worse before it got better. 2 days after Clara decided to stay, Rowan lost another client. Then another. By the end of the week, he had exactly one job left: repairing fence posts for a farmer 3 miles outside town who didn't care about gossip because he barely came into town anyway. Clara watched Rowan's jaw get tighter each time someone turned him down. Watched him count the money in the jar on the shelf, doing calculations in his head that never came out right. "We'll be fine," he said one night after a particularly brutal day. They both knew he was lying. The children felt it too. Nora became quieter, her usual chatter replaced by anxious silence. She'd wake up crying most nights, and Clara would hold her until she fell back asleep. Eli threw himself into chores with grim determination, chopping enough firewood to last through 2 winters, like he could single-handedly keep the family afloat through sheer, stubborn work. Clara tried to help. She planted a garden, even though it was early for it, worked on mending every piece of clothing in the house, made meals stretch further than they had any right to. But you couldn't eat dignity, and dignity was about all they had left. The town made sure they knew it. Clara was walking back from the well one morning when she passed a group of women on the street. Their conversation stopped the moment they saw her. "Excuse me," Clara said, trying to move past. One of the women, Mrs. Henderson, who ran the boarding house, stepped into her path. "My husband says Rowan Hale's business is finished," Mrs. Henderson said. "Says nobody wants to hire a man who's got such poor judgment." Clara kept her voice level. "Your husband is entitled to his opinion." "It's not just opinion, it's fact. You've ruined that family." Mrs. Henderson's eyes were cold. Those poor children. First they lose their mother, now they have to watch their father destroy himself over some woman who showed up with nothing and brought shame on their whole house. The other women murmured agreement. Clara felt her fingernails digging into her palms. "If you'll excuse me." "We won't," another woman spoke up. "You need to hear this. You need to understand what you've done." "I haven't done anything except exist," Claire said.
You exist in the wrong place, with the wrong family. Mrs. Henderson leaned closer. Leave, Miss Whitmore. Leave before you drag them down any further, before those children end up in the poorhouse because their father was too foolish to see what you really are. Clara wanted to scream, wanted to tell these women exactly where they could put their judgment, but she'd learned that anger only proved their point.
Good day, she said instead, and walked past them with her head up. She made it around the corner before her hands started shaking. That night she told Rowan what happened. He listened in silence, his expression getting darker with every word. Tomorrow I'm going into town, he said when she finished. I'm going to have a conversation with Mrs. Henderson's husband. That'll just make it worse. I don't care.
Yes, you do. Clara reached across the table. You care about your children, about keeping a roof over their heads, about you, Rowan interrupted. I care about you, and I'm not going to stand by while people treat you like this. You don't have a choice. There's always a choice. But choices required options, and their options were running out fast. 3 weeks after Clara decided to stay, Rowan came home and put the last of their money on the table.
That's it, he said. That's everything. Clara stared at the bills and coins. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. How long will it last? She asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3 if we're careful. Eli, who'd been pretending to read in the corner, looked up. What happens after 3 weeks? Rowan's silence was answer enough. That night, Clara lay awake doing her own calculations. She had nothing to sell except her labor, and nobody in town would hire her. Rowan's tools were worth something, but he needed them to work. The cabin was theirs, but you couldn't eat a house. She was still awake when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Rowan appeared in her doorway. Can't sleep either? No. He leaned against the doorframe. I keep thinking about the ranch. What about it? I had almost enough saved. Before, he gestured vaguely, before everything. I was maybe 6 months away from being able to buy land, start building. It was going to be something real, something to leave the kids. Clara sat up. You can still do that. With what money? Rowan laughed bitterly. I can barely feed my family right now. Things will turn around. When? When the town decides to forgive me for taking you in? That's never going to happen, Clara. They've made up their minds. The defeat in his voice scared her more than anything else had. I should leave, Clara said quietly. Don't. Rowan moved into the room. Don't say that. Your children need to eat. You need work. And I'm the reason. You're not the reason. They are. The town. They're small-minded, cruel. He stopped, running a hand through his hair. I knew what I was doing when I offered you that room. I knew there'd be consequences. And I'd make the same choice again. Even if it costs you everything? Rowan sat on the edge of her bed. You're not costing me everything. You're the only good thing that's happened to this family in 2 years. Clara wanted to believe him, but wanting didn't change reality. The children are suffering, she said. The children are learning that sometimes doing the right thing is hard. That's not a bad lesson. It is when they're going hungry. Rowan flinched. We're not there yet. But we will be. And what then? He didn't have an answer. They sat in the dark, both thinking about futures that seemed to be slipping away faster than they could hold on. There has to be something we can do, Clara said finally. Like what? She didn't know, but giving up felt like dying, and she wasn't ready for that yet. The answer came from an unexpected source 2 days later. Clara was in the garden trying to coax the early plants to grow faster through sheer force of will when a buggy pulled up to the cabin. She stood, brushing dirt from her hands, and watched an older man climb down. He was well-dressed, expensive coat, polished boots, the kind of man who had money and wanted everyone to know it. Can I help you? Clara asked. I'm looking for Rowan Hale. He's in town. Can I take a message? The man looked her over with sharp eyes. You're Clara Whitmore. It wasn't a question. Clara's guard went up immediately. Yes. I'm Samuel Pierce. I own the lumber mill about 20 miles north. He pulled off his gloves. I've heard about your situation. Everyone's heard about our situation. Pierce smiled slightly. True. But I'm not here to judge. I'm here to make an offer. Clara crossed her arms. What kind of offer? I need a foreman for my mill. Someone who knows wood, knows construction, can manage men. Rowan Hale's got that reputation. Had it anyway, before... Pierce gestured vaguely. Recent events. You want to hire Rowan? I want to hire someone competent. Don't care about his personal life. Don't care who he's got living in his house. Pierce's eyes were steady. I care about whether he can do the job. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. What's the catch? Clara asked. No catch. Job pays well. Includes a house on the mill property. Good school nearby for the kids. Pierce put his gloves back on. Only issue is it's 20 miles from here. He'd have to move. Clara's heart sank. Move away from Ridgemont? That a problem? It should have been the solution to everything. A job. A house. Distance from the town that hated them. But moving meant leaving, and leaving meant letting the town win. I'll tell him about your offer, Clara said carefully. You do that. I'll be at the hotel in town until tomorrow morning. Pierce tipped his hat. Think about it, both of you. He climbed back into his buggy and drove away. Clara stood in the garden, mind racing. This was the answer. This was the way out. Good job, fresh start, somewhere nobody knew their story. Rowan could provide for his children. They could stop worrying about money. The kids could go to school without being tormented. All they had to do was run. When Rowan came home that evening, Clara told him about Pierce's visit. Rowan listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. 20 miles, he said finally. Yes. New town. New start. Yes. Rowan looked around the cabin, at the walls he'd built, the floor he'd laid, the windows he'd installed. Anne and I built this house together, planned our future here. Clara's throat tightened. I know, but Anne's gone, and the future we planned died with her. He met Clara's eyes. Maybe it's time to stop holding on to ghosts. Is that what you want? To leave? I want my children to be safe, to have enough to eat, to go to school without getting beaten up for defending you. Rowan's voice was rough. If leaving accomplishes that, then yes, that's what I want. What about the ranch? Your dream? Dreams change. He reached for her hand. Mine did the day you stepped off that train. Clara's vision blurred. We'd be running away. We'd be choosing our battles. There's a difference. Was there? Clara wasn't sure anymore. That night at supper, Rowan told the children about the job offer. Nora's face crumpled. But this is our home. I know, baby. I don't want to leave. All my memories of Mama are here. Rowan pulled her into his lap. You'll always have those memories, no matter where we live. Eli said nothing. He just stared at his plate, jaw clenched. Eli, Clara prompted gently. Fine, he bit out. We'll run away like cowards. Eli, Rowan started. No. Eli stood abruptly. You told me to stand up for what's right. You told me not to back down from bullies. And now you want to leave because some people are mean to us? It's more complicated than that. It's not. It's exactly that simple. Eli's voice shook. We're letting them win. Sometimes losing a battle means you can win the war, Rowan said. That's something adults say when they're giving up. Eli left the table and slammed his bedroom door. Nora started crying. Rowan held her while Clara sat frozen, feeling like everything was falling apart. Later, after Nora had cried herself to sleep, and Rowan was trying to talk to Eli through his locked door, Clara found herself standing on the porch, staring out at the dark forest. They were doing the right thing. Moving was practical, smart, the only real option they had. So why did it feel like surrender? He won't talk to me, Rowan said from behind her. Clara turned. Rowan looked exhausted, older than his 32 years. He's angry, Clara said. He's right. Rowan sank into the chair on the porch. We are running away. We're protecting your family. By teaching my children that when things get hard, you leave? Rowan shook his head. What kind of lesson is that? Clara sat beside him. A realistic one. Sometimes leaving is the only choice. Is that what you really believe? She thought about Philadelphia, about the job she'd left, the life she'd abandoned, the future she'd gambled on letters from a stranger. She'd left because she thought something better waited for her. But she'd also left because staying meant facing her failures. I don't know what I believe anymore, Clara admitted. They sat in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. The next morning, Rowan went into town to talk to Samuel Pierce. Clara stayed at the cabin with the children. Nora was withdrawn, playing quietly with her doll. Eli hadn't come out of his room. Clara knocked on his door. "Can I come in?" Silence. "Eli, please." More silence. Clara tried the handle. Unlocked. She opened the door. Eli was sitting on his bed, staring out the window. His eyes were red. "I'm not moving," he said without looking at her. Clara sat on the edge of his bed. "Your father thinks it's best." "I don't care what he thinks." "Eli,
You don't get it." He finally looked at her. "This is our home. Mama's buried in the cemetery here. Her things are in this house. If we leave, it's like we're leaving her behind." Clara's heart broke. "You could never leave her behind. She's part of you. Then why does it feel like we're abandoning her? Because grief was complicated and irrational and it never really left you alone." "I understand," Clara said quietly. "How could you? You never lost anyone."
The assumption stung, but Clara let it pass. "I lost my parents when I was 14. House fire. I wasn't home." Eli's expression shifted. "I didn't know." "There's a lot you don't know about me." Clara looked at her hands. "After they died, I lived with my sister. She had her own family, and I was just extra. Someone to feed, to house, to tolerate. I spent 4 years feeling like I didn't belong anywhere." "Is that why you answered Thomas's letters?" "Partly. I wanted somewhere that was mine, where I wasn't just the orphan being taken care of." Clara met Eli's eyes. "But I was running away from loneliness, not towards something real. And when Thomas rejected me, I wanted to run again. I was going to get back on that train and disappear." "Why didn't you?" "Your father offered me a choice, a chance to stay, to build something instead of running from something." Clara reached for Eli's hand. "But maybe running isn't always wrong. Maybe sometimes it's just practical." Eli pulled his hand away. "You don't believe that." "I'm trying to." "Well, stop trying." His voice was fierce. "Because if you believe it, then what was the point? What was the point of you staying? Of us caring about you? Of any of this?" Clara didn't have an answer. Eli turned back to the window. "If we move, I'm not calling you anything except Clara. Not Miss Clara. Not—" He stopped. "Not what?" He didn't answer. Clara stood. "Your father will be back soon. We should—" "Mama." The word stopped Clara cold. "Nora calls you that sometimes," Eli continued, still not looking at her. "When she's scared or upset. She doesn't even realize she's doing it. And I wanted to tell her to stop, that you're not our mother, that she's being disloyal to Mama's memory." Clara's throat closed up. "But then I realized, I want to call you that too." Eli's voice cracked. "And I hate myself for it, because it feels like I'm replacing her, like I'm forgetting." Clara moved back to the bed and pulled Eli into a fierce hug. He resisted for a second, then collapsed against her, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "You're not replacing anyone," Clara whispered. "Your mother will always be your mother. Always. What you feel for me doesn't take anything away from what you felt for her." "Then why does it hurt so much?" "Because love always hurts a little, especially when you've lost it before." They stayed like that until Eli's tears stopped. When he pulled back, his face was blotchy, but calmer. "If we move, will you come with us?" he asked. "Of course." "Promise?" "I promise." Eli nodded. "Okay. Then I guess it doesn't matter where we live, as long as we're together." The simple faith in his voice nearly undid Clara completely. Rowan returned an hour later. Clara was in the kitchen when he came in. One look at his face told her everything. "You took the job," she said. "I didn't." Clara blinked. "What?" Rowan sat heavily at the table. "I went to talk to Pierce, went to the hotel, ready to accept, and I ran into Thomas Garrett in the lobby." Clara's stomach dropped. "What did he say?" "Nothing, at first. He just stared at me. Then he said—" Rowan stopped. "He said he was glad I was leaving, that it proved he was right about you, that you'd destroy anything you touched, and at least now his wife could have peace knowing you were gone." "Rowan—" "And I realized, if I take this job, if we move, he wins. They all win. Every person who judged you, who treated you like you were shameful, who made you feel less than, they get to be right. Rowan's hands clenched. I can't give them that. Clara sank into the chair across from him. So what did you tell Pierce? That I appreciated the offer, but I was staying in Ridgemont. We can't survive here, you said so yourself. Then we'll find another way. Rowan met her eyes. I won't run. I won't teach my children that standing up for what's right only matters when it's easy. This isn't about what's easy. It's about what's possible. I don't care about possible. I care about right. Clara wanted to scream at his stubbornness, wanted to shake him until he saw reason. But she also understood exactly what he meant, because leaving felt wrong. It felt like admitting defeat, like saying the town's judgment mattered more than their own choices. We'll lose everything, Clara said quietly. Maybe. Or maybe we'll find something better. That's not a plan. That's hope. Rowan smiled grimly. Hope's all I've got left. Clara looked at this man, this stubborn, impossible, infuriating man, and felt something shift inside her. He was choosing to fight, to stay, to believe that dignity mattered more than comfort, and she loved him for it. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She loved him. Not gratitude, not obligation, not convenience. Real love. The kind that made you stay even when leaving made more sense. The kind that made you fight battles you couldn't win just because the person beside you refused to surrender. Okay, Clara said. Rowan looked surprised. Okay, we stay, we fight. We figure it out. Clara reached across the table. Together. Rowan gripped her hand like a lifeline. Together. But together didn't make the math work. It didn't put food in the pantry or money in the jar. It didn't stop the town from closing ranks against them. 3 days later, the eviction notice appeared. It wasn't really an eviction. The cabin was theirs outright. But the town council had found an obscure ordinance about property maintenance and decided Rowan was in violation. They gave him 30 days to make repairs that would cost more money than they had, or forfeit the property. Clara read the notice 3 times, trying to find a way. It didn't mean what it clearly meant. They can't do this, she said. Rowan's expression was carved from stone. They just did. We'll fight it. With what? We can't afford a lawyer, can't afford the repairs, can't afford... He stopped, jaw working. They've got us cornered. Eli appeared in the doorway. What's wrong? Rowan handed him the notice without a word. Eli read it, face going pale. This is because of me. Because I fought those kids at school. Because I... No. Rowan's voice was sharp. This is because of cruel people doing cruel things, not because of anything you did. Then what do we do? The question hung in the air, unanswered. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the notice, about the money they didn't have, about the choice that had been taken from them. They could leave now, take what they could carry, and start over somewhere else, or they could stay and fight a battle they'd already lost. She was still awake when she heard the noise outside. Footsteps. Voices. The smell of smoke. Clara ran to the window and her blood turned to ice. A group of men stood in the yard, torches in hand. She couldn't see their faces in the dark, but she didn't need to. Rowan was already up, already moving. He grabbed his rifle from above the door. Stay inside, he ordered Clara. Keep the children in their rooms. Rowan... He was already outside. Clara ran to Eli's room and shook him awake. Get your sister. Get to Clara's room. Lock the door. Don't come out no matter what you hear. Eli's eyes went wide. What's happening? Just do it. Now. She waited until both children were locked in her room, then went to the window. Rowan stood on the porch, rifle pointed at the ground, but ready. The men with torches had spread out in a loose semicircle around the cabin. One of them stepped forward. Clara recognized him. Henderson, the boarding house owner. You need to leave, Hale, Henderson called out. This is my property. Rowan's voice was steady. You're trespassing. Council says you got 30 days to fix this place up. We're here to make sure you understand what happens if you don't. I understand perfectly. Now get off my land. Henderson gestured to the men with him. We're not here to hurt anyone, just to deliver a message. Message received. Leave. Not until you understand. Henderson's voice hardened. You brought shame on this town. You and that woman. And we're done tolerating it. Clara felt fury burning in her chest. Rowan raised the rifle slightly. I'm going to count to 10. If you're not gone by then, I start shooting. You wouldn't... 1. The men shifted nervously. 2. Hale, be reasonable. 3. You shoot one of us, the law will... 4. 5. The men were backing up now, torches wavering. This isn't over, Henderson spat. 6. 7. The men turned and fled into the darkness. Rowan stood on the porch until the sound of their footsteps faded. Then he lowered the rifle, shoulders sagging. Clara opened the door. Are they gone? For now. Rowan's hands were shaking. But they'll be back. Clara went to him, wrapping her arms around him from behind. He leaned back against her, exhausted. We can't keep doing this, she whispered. I know. We have to make a choice. I know. But knowing didn't make the choice any easier. Inside, they found Eli and Nora huddled together in Clara's room, both pale with fear. Was it bad men? Nora asked in a small voice. It was scared men, Rowan said gently. Being scared makes people do stupid things. Are they coming back? Rowan looked at Clara. She saw the truth in his eyes. Yes, they were coming back. And next time they might do more than wave torches. We're safe tonight, Rowan said instead. That's what matters. He carried Nora back to bed while Clara stayed with Eli. We should leave, Eli said quietly. Clara looked at him in surprise. I thought you wanted to stay. I did, but not if someone's going to burn down our house. Eli's voice was tight. Not if staying means Papa has to point guns at people. Your father won't let it come to that. You don't know that. Neither does he. Eli met her eyes. I was wrong before. This isn't about pride or proving something. It's about survival. And if we stay, I don't think we survive. Out of the mouths of children, again. Clara pulled him close. Your father and I will figure it out, I promise. But she wasn't sure she could keep that promise. The next morning, the answer arrived in the form of a telegram. The Western Union boy rode up just after dawn, handed Clara the message, and rode away without waiting for a reply. Clara opened it with shaking hands. It was from Samuel Pierce. Offer still stands. Stop heard about last night. Stop. Leave today. Stop. Millhouse ready. Stop. Come now. Stop. Clara stood on the porch, telegram clutched in her hand, and felt the weight of the decision pressing down. She could show this to Rowan, could convince him that leaving now wasn't surrender, it was survival. That protecting his children mattered more than pride. Or she could burn the telegram and pretend it never came. Could stand beside Rowan while they fought a battle they couldn't win. Could watch everything fall apart because neither of them could bring themselves to give up. Clara looked at the cabin, at the home Rowan and his late wife had built, at the place where these children had been born and raised, at the life they were fighting so hard to keep. Then she looked toward town, where people waited for them to fail, where men with torches wanted them gone, where every day was a new battle. The choice should have been obvious, but nothing about this was simple. Clara folded the telegram and put it in her pocket. Then she went inside to tell Rowan they had one more option, and this time they'd have to choose together, because whatever they decided, they'd live with it for the rest of their lives. Clara found Rowan in his workshop, staring at a half-finished chair like it held answers he couldn't find anywhere else. Pierce sent a telegram, she said. Rowan didn't look up. What's it say? Clara handed it to him. He read it once, then again, then set it down carefully on the workbench. He heard about last night, Rowan said. News travels fast. In a town this size, everything travels fast. Rowan picked up a piece of sandpaper, then put it down again. What do you think we should do? The question surprised her. You're asking me? This affects you as much as it affects us. More, maybe. Rowan finally looked at her. If we stay, it gets worse. If we leave, you lose whatever you were building here. Clara almost laughed. What I was building? Rowan, I was building a life with you and your children. That doesn't change based on geography. Doesn't it? New town means starting over. Again, you've already done that twice. Third time's the charm, Clara said, trying for lightness. Rowan didn't smile. I'm serious. You didn't sign up for any of this. The threats, the judgment, men with torches. You could walk away right now and nobody would blame you. I would blame me.
Why? You don't owe us anything. Clara moved closer, taking his hands in hers. I owe you everything. You gave me shelter when I had nothing. You gave me a family when I was alone. You gave me a reason to stop running. Her voice caught. So no, I'm not walking away. Whatever we decide together.
Rowan pulled her against him, burying his face in her hair.
I don't know what to do, he whispered.
I don't know how to protect you and keep my pride and take care of my kids all at the same time.
Then maybe we stop trying to do all of it. Maybe we pick what matters most. And what's that? Clara pulled back to look at him. Each other. The rest is just details. Rowan cupped her face. When did you get so wise? About 5 minutes ago. Don't expect it to last.
This time he did smile. Small, but real. They stood in the quiet workshop, holding each other, while outside the world waited for them to make a choice neither of them wanted to make. Finally, Rowan spoke. We should talk to the kids. They gathered around the kitchen table, all 4 of them. Nora sat in Rowan's lap, thumb in her mouth, a habit she'd supposedly outgrown but had returned to since the men with torches. Eli sat rigid, trying to look older than 12. Rowan explained the situation simply. Pierce's offer. The eviction notice, the choice between staying and fighting or leaving and starting fresh. When he finished, silence filled the kitchen. I vote we leave, Nora said quietly. Everyone looked at her. Those men scared me, she continued, thumb still in her mouth. And people at school are mean, and I'm tired of being scared all the time. Rowan's expression crumbled. Baby, I'm so sorry. It's okay, Papa. I know you tried. Nora looked at Clara. But I think we should go somewhere people are nice. Somewhere we can be happy. Clara's throat tightened. Eli said nothing. He just stared at the table, jaw clenched. Eli, Rowan prompted. Whatever you decide is fine, Eli muttered. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I've got. Rowan started to push, but Clara put a hand on his arm. Let him think about it. They sent the children outside to play, though play was generous. Nora sat on the porch steps, listless. Eli disappeared into the woods. Rowan and Clara stayed at the table. Nora's right, Clara said. They're miserable here. They're children. They're resilient. They're traumatized. There's a difference. Rowan flinched. You think I don't know that? You think I don't see what this is doing to them? Then why are we still debating? Because running away doesn't teach them anything except how to be cowards. Clara's temper flared. It teaches them survival. It teaches them that sometimes the brave thing is knowing when to let go. Or it teaches them that other people's opinions matter more than their own integrity. Integrity doesn't keep you warm at night. It doesn't put food on the table. It doesn't... It's all I have left. Rowan's voice cracked. Don't you understand? I already lost my wife, lost my savings, lost my reputation. If I lose this too, if I let them drive me out of my own home, then what do I have? The rawness in his voice stopped Clara cold. You have your children, she said quietly. You have me. That's more than most people get. Rowan's shoulders sagged. I know you're right, but it still feels like losing. Maybe losing this battle means we get to fight another day. He looked at her with exhausted eyes. When did you become the optimist? About 6 minutes ago. Still don't expect it to last. Rowan almost smiled. Almost. They decided to sleep on it. Give themselves one more night to think before committing to either choice. But the choice was made for them an hour later when Eli came running back from the woods. Papa! He was out of breath, face pale. You need to come, now. They followed him into the trees, Nora trailing behind. About a quarter mile from the cabin, Eli stopped and pointed. Someone had been there. Recently. The evidence was everywhere, broken branches, boot prints in the soft earth, cigarette butts still warm, and carved into the bark of a large pine tree, crude but clear. Get out. Rowan's expression went cold. They're watching us. They're trying to scare us, Clara corrected. Well, it's working. Eli's voice shook. Papa, they were this close to the house. What if they come at night? What if they won't? But Rowan didn't sound convinced. Clara looked at the carved words, at the cigarette butts, at the boot prints leading back toward town. These weren't just idle threats anymore. Someone was actively planning something.
We need to leave, she said. Today. Now. Rowan started to argue, then looked at his children's faces and stopped. All right, he said quietly. We leave. The decision, once made, moved fast. They had 2 hours before the last train to Pierce's mill town. 2 hours to pack a life into bags and boxes. 2 hours to say goodbye to everything they'd known. Clara worked mechanically, folding clothes, wrapping dishes, trying not to think about what they were leaving behind. Nora cried quietly while packing her toys. Eli moved through the house like a ghost, touching walls and door frames like he was memorizing them. Rowan was in his workshop, loading tools into crates. Clara found him standing in front of the chair he'd been working on, the one he'd been staring at that morning. It's not finished, he said. You can finish it at the new place. It won't be the same. Clara didn't argue. Because he was right. Nothing would be the same. She helped him load the wagon, tools, clothes, a few pieces of furniture they couldn't bear to leave. Everything else would stay. The house, the land, the dreams. They were nearly done when Clara realized she'd forgotten something. She ran back inside, up to her small room. In the drawer of the dresser was the wooden box containing Thomas's letters, the ones that had brought her here, that had promised a future that never materialized. Clara opened the box and looked at the letters. 17 of them. 17 lies wrapped in pretty words. She carried them to the kitchen stove and threw them in, one by one. The paper caught fire immediately, curling and blackening. Clara watched them burn, feeling something inside her burn with them. Anger, resentment, the last lingering shame of being rejected. All of it turned to ash. When the last letter was gone, Clara closed the stove door and walked away without looking back. They were loading the last box when a buggy appeared on the road. Rowan tensed, hand moving toward his rifle. But it wasn't a mob. It was Samuel Pierce. The lumber mill owner climbed down, looking at their packed wagon with satisfaction. Got my telegram, I see. We're taking the job, Rowan said curtly. Smart choice. Pierce glanced toward town. Heard there was trouble last night. News travels. It does, especially when it involves torches and threats. Pierce pulled out an envelope. Train leaves in 90 minutes. These are your tickets. And this, he handed Rowan a second envelope, is an advance on your salary. Should cover immediate expenses. Rowan opened it and went very still. This is too much. It's exactly enough. You've got a family to relocate, a house to settle into, children to get enrolled in school. Pierce's expression was firm. Take it. You've earned it just by surviving this place. Rowan looked like he might argue, then nodded. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just show up ready to work. Pierce tipped his hat to Clara. Ma'am, children, safe travels. He left as quickly as he'd arrived. Rowan stared at the money in his hands. More cash than they'd seen in months. Maybe more than they'd ever had at once. This changes things, he said quietly. Clara knew what he meant. With money, they had options. With options, they had hope. They finished loading in silence. Then Rowan went through the cabin one last time, checking windows, banking the stove, closing doors that wouldn't be opened again. When he came out, his face was carefully blank. Ready? Clara asked. No, but we're going anyway. They climbed into the wagon, Rowan and Clara on the bench, Eli and Nora in the back with the boxes. The horse started forward, pulling them down the dirt road toward town. None of them looked back. But as they passed through Ridgemont's main street, heading for the train station, people stopped to watch. Clara saw Mrs. Henderson outside the boarding house, arms crossed, satisfaction clear on her face. Saw the shopkeeper who'd refused them credit. Saw the mothers whose children had tormented Nora. She saw all of them and felt nothing but pity, because they were staying in this small, mean town with its small, mean people, and she was leaving. They were almost to the station when someone called out, "Hale, wait!" Rowan pulled the wagon to a stop. Thomas Garrett was running toward them, face flushed. Clara's stomach dropped. Thomas reached the wagon, breathing hard. "You're leaving." "That's right," Rowan said coldly. "Good. That's good." Thomas looked at Clara. "I wanted to say, I'm sorry for everything. The letters, the rejection, all of it. You didn't deserve that." Clara stared at him. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because Margaret left me. This morning. Took the train back to her mother's place. Thomas's laugh was bitter. Said I ruined her life, said I destroyed everything I touched, and she's right. I'm sorry about your marriage, Clara said carefully, but that has nothing to do with me. I know, I needed you to know it wasn't your fault, any of it. You were just... He stopped. You were just the person I blamed instead of blaming myself. The admission should have felt like vindication. Instead, Clara just felt tired. I hope you figure things out, she said. I really do, but we need to catch our train. Thomas stepped back. Right, of course, Good luck. With everything. Rowan snapped the reins and the wagon moved forward. Clara didn't look back at Thomas. Didn't spare him another thought. He was the past, and she was done living there. At the station, they unloaded the wagon quickly. Rowan arranged for their goods to be shipped while Clara bought provisions for the journey. They had 20 minutes before the train departed. Eli stood on the platform, staring at the town he'd grown up in. You okay? Clara asked. I don't know. Ask me in a year. Fair enough. Nora was quiet, clinging to her doll. Clara knelt beside her. Scared? Clara asked. Nora nodded. Me too, but sometimes scared is okay. It means we're doing something brave. Is leaving brave? Sometimes the bravest thing is starting over. Nora considered this. Will the new place be better? I don't know, but we'll be together. That's what matters. Nora hugged her suddenly, fiercely. I'm glad you're coming with us. Clara held her tight, fighting tears. Me too, sweetheart. The train whistle blew. They boarded, Rowan first, then the children, then Clara. She paused at the top of the steps, looking back at Ridgemont one last time. The town looked exactly the same as it had the day she'd arrived. Gray buildings, bare trees, cold sky, but Clara was different now, stronger, braver, less alone. She stepped into the train car and didn't look back again. They found seats together, bags stowed overhead. The train lurched forward with a groan of metal and steam. Through the window, Clara watched the platform slide away, then the buildings, then the town itself. Ridgemont disappeared behind them. Nora fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from emotion. Eli stared out the window, face unreadable. Rowan sat beside Clara, their shoulders touching. No regrets? He asked quietly. Clara thought about it. About the cabin they'd left behind. About the life they'd built and abandoned. About the battle they'd lost. No regrets, she said finally. Just sadness, maybe, for what we couldn't save. We saved what mattered, each other. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. When did you get so wise? About 7 minutes ago. Don't expect it to last. She smiled despite everything. They rode in silence for a while, watching the landscape change outside the window. Pine forests gave way to open fields, then hills, then more forests. Eventually, Eli spoke without looking away from the window. Papa? Yeah? I'm glad we left. Rowan's expression shifted. Yeah? Yeah. That place was killing us, slowly, maybe, but still killing us. Eli finally looked at his father. We deserve better than that. Rowan's voice was rough. We do. And Clara deserves better too. Clara's throat tightened. Eli met her eyes. You could have left any time. Could have taken Pierce's offer yourself, started over somewhere we weren't, but you stayed, even when staying hurt. You're my family, Clara said simply. Where else would I go? Eli nodded like that made perfect sense. Okay, just wanted to say, I'm glad you're here. It wasn't much, but from Eli, it was everything. Clara reached across and squeezed his hand. He squeezed back. They traveled through the afternoon and into evening. The train made stops at small towns along the way, places that looked remarkably like Ridgemont, filled with the same kind of people living the same kind of lives. But they didn't stop. They kept moving forward. As darkness fell, the conductor came through lighting lamps. The warm glow filled the car, making everything feel smaller, more intimate. Rowan had been quiet for hours, staring at nothing. Finally, he spoke. I keep thinking about the ranch, the one I wanted to build. You can still build it, Clara said. Someday. Maybe, but it won't be the same. It was supposed to be there, on that land, in that place. Anne and I planned it together, drew up the whole thing. Clara didn't know what to say to that.
But then I think maybe that dream died with her. Maybe holding on to it was just another way of not letting go. Rowan looked at Clara. Maybe it's time for new dreams. What kind of dreams? Honest ones. Real ones. Ones that include you. Clara's heart stuttered. Rowan, I'm not good with words. Never have been. But I need you to know something. He took her hand. When you stepped off that train, broken and scared and trying so hard to be brave, I saw myself. I saw someone who'd lost everything and was still trying to stand up straight. Clara's vision blurred. And then you came into my house, and you just fit. Like you'd always been there. Like we'd been incomplete, and you filled the spaces we didn't even know were empty. Rowan's thumb traced circles on her palm. The kids love you. I love you. And I know this isn't the proposal you probably dreamed about on a train running away from everything, but yes, Clara interrupted. Rowan blinked. I haven't asked yet. You were about to, and the answer is yes. You don't even know what the question is. I know enough. Clara leaned closer. You're asking if I'll build a life with you, if I'll be a mother to your children, if I'll stand beside you whatever comes next, and I'm saying yes to all of it. Rowan's eyes were bright. Just like that? Just like that. He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she might break. Clara kissed him back, tasting salt and hope and the beginning of something new. When they pulled apart, Eli was watching them with a small smile. About time, he said. Rowan laughed. Actually, laughed. You're 12. What do you know about it? I know you've been looking at her like that for months. I was starting to think you'd never actually do anything about it. I was waiting for the right moment. On a train running away from an angry mob. Very romantic, Papa. Even Clara had to laugh at that. Nora stirred in her sleep, murmuring something unintelligible before settling again. Rowan looked at his sleeping daughter, then at Eli, then at Clara. We're going to be okay, he said, like he was trying to convince himself. We're going to be better than okay, Clara said. We're going to be happy. You sound sure. I am. Because we chose this. We chose each other. And that's stronger than anything that town could throw at us. Rowan pulled her close, and Clara let herself relax against him. The train rattled on through the darkness, carrying them toward an uncertain future. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, Clara wasn't afraid of uncertainty. She had people who loved her, people she loved in return. And wherever they ended up, they'd figure it out together. The train whistle blew, lonely and distant. Clara closed her eyes and let herself sleep. She woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and Nora's excited voice. Look! Look at all the trees! Clara sat up, disoriented. Rowan was already awake, watching the landscape change outside. They'd left the sparse pine forest behind. Now, massive trees rose on either side of the tracks. Old growth timber, thick and tall and alive in a way the Ridgemont woods had never been. We're close, Rowan said. Another hour, maybe. Clara's stomach fluttered with nerves. What if it's worse than Ridgemont? What if... Then we'll deal with it. Together. That word again. Together. Clara held on to it like a lifeline. The train pulled into Pierce's mill town just before noon. It was bigger than Ridgemont. Not a city, but substantial. Buildings lined the main street, well-maintained and prosperous-looking. People moved with purpose, not the aimless shuffle of a dying town. And at the edge of everything, the lumber mill rose like a cathedral, massive saws, stacks of timber, the smell of fresh-cut wood. Samuel Pierce was waiting on the platform. Welcome, he said as they disembarked. How was the journey? Long, Rowan said. I imagine so. Come on, I'll show you to your house. He led them to a wagon and drove them through town. People stared, but with curiosity rather than judgment. A few even waved. The house sat on mill property, about half a mile from the main operations. It was small but solid, 2 stories, recently painted, with a porch that wrapped around the front. It's not much, Pierce said, but it's sturdy. And it's yours as long as you work for me. Rowan stared at the house like he couldn't quite believe it was real. Eli was already running up the porch steps. Papa, there's 3 bedrooms. Nora followed her brother inside, squealing with delight. Clara stood beside Rowan, watching their children explore their new home. It's perfect, she said quietly. It's a start, Rowan corrected. But he was smiling. Pierce handed Rowan a set of keys. Get settled today. You start tomorrow. 6 in the morning. I'll be there. I know you will. Pierce tipped his hat. Welcome to Timber Falls. He left them standing in front of their new house. Rowan turned to Clara, keys in hand. Ready? Clara thought about everything they'd left behind, everything they'd lost, everything they'd survived. Then she thought about what they'd gained, each other, a future, hope. Ready? She said. They walked inside together, leaving the past behind on the porch. The house smelled like fresh paint and possibility. Eli was already claiming the bigger bedroom. Nora was spinning in circles in what would be her room, arms outstretched. Clara stood in the kitchen, looking out the window at the forest beyond. This wasn't the future she'd imagined when she'd boarded that train to Ridgemont. It wasn't the life Thomas's letters had promised. It was better, because it was real, built on honesty and choice and love that had been tested and survived. Rowan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Happy? He asked. Clara leaned back against him. Getting there. We'll get there together. There was that word again. Clara smiled, turning in his arms to kiss him properly. Outside, the children's laughter drifted through the open windows. The forest rustled in the breeze. Somewhere in the distance, the mill saws hummed their steady rhythm. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And that was everything. The first month in Timber Falls passed in a blur of adjustment and exhaustion. Rowan left before dawn each morning, returning after dark covered in sawdust and smelling like pine. The work was brutal. 12-hour days managing crews, solving problems, learning Pierce's operation from the ground up. But the pay was steady, and that steadiness felt like wealth after months of uncertainty. Clara threw herself into making the house a home. She scrubbed floors that didn't need scrubbing, planted a garden that might not survive, and cooked meals that stretched their budget further than it had any right to go. The work kept her hands busy, and her mind from wandering back to Ridgemont, to the cabin they'd abandoned, to the life they'd lost. The children struggled in their own ways. Nora clung to Clara like a shadow, terrified that if she let go, Clara would disappear. She had nightmares most nights, sometimes about the men with torches, sometimes about losing her mother all over again, sometimes about nameless fears that left her sobbing and inconsolable. Eli withdrew. He went through the motions of living, helped with chores, enrolled in the new school, answered when spoken to, but the spark that had made him fight back in Ridgemont was gone. He moved through their new life like a ghost, present but not really there. Give it time, Rowan said one night when Clara voiced her concerns. They're grieving. We all are. Grieving what? We chose to leave. Doesn't make the loss any less real. Clara knew he was right, but knowing didn't make it easier to watch. The town itself was different from Ridgemont in ways both obvious and subtle. People were polite but distant, giving the new family space to settle in without overwhelming them with curiosity. The school was bigger, better funded, with teachers who actually seemed to care. The general store carried items Clara hadn't seen in months. Fresh fruit, decent coffee, fabric that wasn't worn thin. But there was also something harder to define, an emptiness, like they'd escaped one prison only to find themselves in a different kind of cage. Clara was hanging laundry one afternoon when a woman appeared at the fence. "You're the new foreman's wife," the woman said. Not a question. Clara set down the wet shirt she'd been hanging. "Not officially, not yet," the woman smiled. "But you will be. I can tell." She extended a hand over the fence. "I'm Ruth Carmichael. My husband works at the mill too. We live just down the road." Clara shook her hand, surprised by the gesture. "Clara Whitmore." "I know, word travels, even in a town this size." Ruth's expression was kind. "I also know you came from Ridgemont, that you had a rough time there." Clara's guard went up immediately. "We're starting fresh here." "Good. You should. That town's full of small people with smaller minds." Ruth leaned against the fence. "But I'm not here to gossip. I'm here to invite you to tea tomorrow, 2:00. Bring your daughter if you want. Mine's about the same age." Clara didn't know what to say. Kindness still felt foreign, suspicious. "I don't," she started. "Look, I know you probably don't trust easy hospitality right now. Can't say I blame you, but not everyone's out to hurt you." Ruth's smile was gentle. "Sometimes tea is just tea." Clara found herself nodding. "Tomorrow, 2:00. Perfect."
See you then. Ruth left, and Clara stood among the laundry, feeling like she'd just been thrown a lifeline she wasn't sure she wanted to grab. That night at dinner, she mentioned the invitation. Rowan looked up from his plate. You should go. I don't know these people. You didn't know us either once. Fair point. Nora was excited about the prospect of meeting another little girl. Eli said nothing, which had become his default response to everything. The next afternoon, Clara and Nora walked to the Carmichael house, a cheerful yellow building with flower boxes and a garden that made Clara's look pathetic by comparison. Ruth answered the door with a warm smile and a little girl hiding behind her skirts.
This is my daughter, Sarah. She's shy, but she'll warm up. Ruth ushered them inside. Come in, come in. I made cookies. Fair warning, they're not great. Baking's not my strength. The house was comfortable and lived in, with the kind of casual disorder that came from actually living somewhere rather than just existing in it. Sarah and Nora sized each other up with the wariness of children who'd been hurt by other children. Ruth poured tea and pushed the cookie plate toward Clara. So, tell me about yourself. And skip the polite version. I want the real story. Clara wasn't sure where to start. What do you want to know? Everything, but let's start with why you left Ridgemont. I heard rumors, but rumors are just noise. Clara found herself talking about Thomas, about the rejection, about Rowan's unexpected kindness, about the months of building something fragile and beautiful, about the judgment, the threats, the impossible choice between pride and survival. Ruth listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from curiosity to anger to understanding. When Clara finished, Ruth sat back. Well, that town can rot. The bluntness startled a laugh out of Clara. I'm serious, Ruth continued. Small-minded people always think their cruelty is righteousness, makes them feel better about their own miserable lives. She refilled Clara's tea. But you got out, that's what matters. Sometimes it doesn't feel like winning. Survival never does, but it beats the alternative. They talked for 2 hours, about children, about husbands, about the 1,000 small struggles of making a life work. Sarah and Nora disappeared into the backyard, and through the window Clara could see them playing, hesitant at first, then with growing enthusiasm. When it was time to leave, Ruth walked them to the door. Same time next week? She asked. Clara realized she wanted that, wanted this thing that might become friendship. Same time next week, she agreed. Walking home, Nora chattered about Sarah, how she had a cat, how she knew the best hiding spots in her yard, how she'd invited Nora to her birthday party next month. Clara listened, feeling something tight in her chest loosen slightly. Maybe they could build a life here after all. But building a life required more than just surviving. It required letting go of the past, and that proved harder than Clara expected. She woke one night to find Rowan's side of the bed empty. She found him on the porch, staring at nothing. Can't sleep? She asked, sitting beside him. I keep thinking about the cabin, wondering who's living there now, if they're taking care of it. Does it matter? Probably not, but I can't stop wondering. Rowan's voice was rough. I built that place with my own hands. Anne and I planned every detail, and I just walked away. You didn't have a choice. I did. I could have stayed, could have fought harder. Clara took his hand. And what would that have proven? That you're stubborn? We already knew that. Despite everything, Rowan smiled slightly. You did the right thing, Clara continued. You protected your children. You chose life over pride. That's not weakness. That's strength. Doesn't feel like strength. Feels like I failed them. Failed Anne's memory. Failed everything she and I built together. Anne would want you to be happy. To give your children a good life. You think she'd want you martyring yourself in that cabin just to prove a point? Rowan was quiet for a long time. No, she'd tell me I was being an idiot. Smart woman. She was. Rowan looked at Clara. But so are you. And I need you to know, loving you doesn't mean I loved her less. It just means my heart's big enough for both. Clara's eyes burned. I know. And I'm not trying to replace her. I'm just trying to be here. For you and the kids. You're doing more than that. You're giving us a reason to keep going. They sat in the darkness, holding hands, while the forest whispered around them. We should get married, Rowan said suddenly. Clara turned to look at him. What? Properly married. with a ceremony and witnesses and everything legal. Rowan's expression was serious. I asked you on the train and you said yes, but I want to make it official. Want everyone to know you're family. I don't need a ceremony to know I'm family. Maybe not. But the kids do, and I do. And he stopped. I want to marry you, Clara. Not because it's practical or convenient, because I love you, because I want to build a future with you, because you make me believe in futures again. Clara couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. Is that a yes? Rowan asked. She kissed him instead of answering, long and deep and full of everything she couldn't put into words. When they finally pulled apart, Rowan was smiling. I'll take that as a yes, he said. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the courthouse in Timber Falls. Ruth and her husband served as witnesses. Nora wore her best dress and carried wildflowers Clara had picked that morning. Eli stood beside his father, trying to look grown up and failing because he kept grinning. The judge read the vows. Clara and Rowan repeated them. And just like that, she went from Clara Whitmore to Clara Hale. It felt both monumental and anticlimactic. No grand celebration, no elaborate party, just paperwork and promises, and a family that was finally, legally official. Afterward, they had dinner at the one decent restaurant in town. Nora talked nonstop about the ceremony. Eli was quiet, but present in a way he hadn't been in weeks. Rowan kept reaching for Clara's hand like he needed to confirm she was real. Walking home that evening, Nora slipped her hand into Clara's. Can I call you Mama now? She asked. For real? Clara's heart clenched. You can call me whatever feels right. Mama feels right. Then Mama it is. Nora beamed and ran ahead to catch up with Eli. Rowan pulled Clara close. How does it feel, being a wife and mother all in one day? Clara thought about it, about the terrified woman who'd stepped off the train in Ridgemont, about the broken pieces she'd carried, about the slow, painful process of becoming whole again. It feels like coming home, she said finally. Good. Because you are home. With us. Always. And for the first time since her parents died, Clara believed she actually belonged somewhere. But belonging didn't mean everything was suddenly perfect. Life still happened, messy and complicated and real. Eli struggled at school. Not academically, he was smart, always had been. But socially. He kept to himself, suspicious of kindness, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Clara watched him build walls and didn't know how to tear them down. One afternoon, she found him sitting on the porch steps, shoulders hunched. What happened? She asked, sitting beside him. Nothing. Eli. He was quiet for a long moment. Some kids at school found out about Ridgemont, about why we left. They asked if it was true that people tried to burn down our house. Clara's blood ran cold. What did you tell them? The truth. That scared people did scared things, and we left because staying wasn't worth dying over. Eli looked at her. They said we were cowards, that real families don't run. The casual cruelty of children never stopped amazing Clara. Those kids are wrong, she said firmly. Running isn't cowardly when you're running towards something better, when you're protecting the people you love. But what if they're right? What if we should have stayed and fought? Then we'd be miserable. Or worse. Clara put her arm around him. Eli, there's no shame in choosing life over pride. Your father made the hardest decision a man can make. He put his children's safety above his own ego. That's not cowardice, that's love. Eli leaned against her. I miss the cabin sometimes, even though it was hard there. At least I knew who I was. Who were you? Ann Hale's son. That meant something. Clara's throat tightened. You're still Ann Hale's son. You always will be. But you're also Rowan and Clara's son now. And that means something too. Eli was quiet. Then so softly, Clara almost missed it. You're a good mom. Clara had to close her eyes against the tears. Thank you, she whispered. They sat together until the sun started setting, not talking, just being. Summer turned to fall. Rowan settled into his job, earning Pierce's trust and respect. Clara's garden produced more than expected, and she started canning for winter. Nora bloomed at school, making friends easily and bringing home drawings and stories and constant chatter. And slowly, carefully, Eli started to open up. He joined the school's woodworking club, made a few friends, started smiling again, real smiles that reached his eyes. The house started feeling less like a place they were staying and more like a home they were building. But the past had a way of showing up when you least expected it. Clara was at the general store one October morning when she heard a familiar voice. "Well, look who it is." She turned to find Margaret Garrett standing behind her. Clara's stomach dropped. Margaret, the other woman looked different, thinner, harder. The elaborate hairstyle was gone, replaced by something simpler. Her dress was nice, but not expensive. "I heard you were here," Margaret said. "Heard you married Rowan Hale. Made a whole new life for yourself." Clara kept her voice level. "What are you doing in Timber Falls?" "Living here, same as you. Got a job at the boarding house." Margaret's smile was bitter. "Turns out when you leave your husband and go back to your mother, she expects you to earn your keep." "I'm sorry things are difficult." "Are you?" "Because from where I'm standing, everything worked out perfectly for you. You got the family, the husband, the fresh start. While I got—" Margaret's voice cracked. Nothing. Clara didn't know what to say. This woman had tormented her, blamed her, made her life hell. But standing here now, Clara could only feel pity. "I am sorry," Clara said quietly. "For your loss, for your marriage, for all of it. But I didn't cause any of that. Thomas did. And you did. The choices you both made. You don't get to—" "I do get to, because I'm done carrying blame for other people's failures." Clara met Margaret's eyes. "You blame me for your unhappiness. Thomas blamed me for his mistakes. The whole town blamed me for existing, and I almost let that destroy me." Margaret looked away. "But I didn't," Clara continued. "I chose to live, to build something new, to stop letting other people's cruelty define me." She picked up her basket. "I hope you find that too. Real peace, not just someone else to blame." She walked away before Margaret could respond. Outside, Clara's hands were shaking. She made it around the corner before she had to stop and breathe. That encounter should have rattled her, should have brought back all the old fear and shame. Instead, she just felt tired, and maybe a little bit free, because Margaret's bitterness wasn't Clara's responsibility. None of it was. She went home and told Rowan what happened. He listened quietly, then pulled her into his arms. "You okay?" "Yeah, actually I am." "She say anything about coming after us? Causing trouble?" Clara shook her head. "She's just broken. Like we all were. She just hasn't figured out how to put the pieces back together yet." "Think she will?" "I don't know. That's up to her." Clara pulled back to look at Rowan. "But it's not our problem anymore. We're done letting Ridgemont haunt us." Rowan kissed her forehead. "Sounds good to me." Winter came early and hard that year. Snow piled high, temperatures dropped below zero, and the mill slowed to a crawl. Money got tight again, but not desperately so. They had enough. Not much more than enough, but enough. Clara found work taking in mending and sewing. It wasn't much, but it helped. And she discovered she liked it, the quiet rhythm of needle and thread, the satisfaction of fixing things that were broken. One evening, she was mending a torn coat while Rowan read to Nora and Eli worked on a school project. The scene was so ordinary, so domestic, that Clara had to stop and just look at it. This was her life now. This warm kitchen, these people, this quiet contentment. It wasn't perfect. Rowan still had nightmares about Anne sometimes. Nora still woke crying occasionally. Eli still struggled with trust. Clara still caught herself waiting for everything to fall apart. But they were healing. Slowly, imperfectly, but healing. "What are you smiling about?" Rowan asked, noticing her expression. "This, us, everything." Rowan set down the book and crossed to her. "Happy?" Clara considered the question. Happiness felt like too simple a word for what she felt. Grateful, maybe. Blessed. Whole. "Yeah," she said finally. "I'm happy." Rowan kissed her, soft and sweet. Nora made gagging noises. Eli rolled his eyes but smiled. This was family. Messy and imperfect and real. And Clara wouldn't trade it for anything. Spring arrived like a promise. The snow melted, revealing green underneath. Clara's garden came back stronger than before. The mill picked up work, and Rowan got a raise. And one morning in late April, Clara woke up sick. She made it to the outhouse just in time, retching until there was nothing left. Rowan found her sitting on the back steps, pale and shaking. You okay? He asked, concerned. I think so. Must have been something I ate. But the next morning, the same thing happened, and the morning after that. By the fourth day, Ruth took one look at Clara and started laughing. You're pregnant, she said with certainty. Clara's world tilted. I can't be. Why not? You're married, aren't you? And I'm guessing you two... Ruth made a gesture that Clara didn't need explained. But we've only been married 6 months. That's plenty of time. Ruth's expression softened. How do you feel about it? Clara didn't know. Terrified, excited, overwhelmed. I don't know how to be a mother, she admitted. You already are one. To Eli and Nora. That's different. They came with instructions. Clara put a hand on her stomach. This is starting from scratch. Then you'll figure it out, same as you figured out everything else. Clara told Rowan that night. He stared at her for a long moment, processing. Then he started crying. Rowan? Clara was alarmed. She'd never seen him cry before. After Anne, I thought that part of my life was over. I thought I'd never... He couldn't finish. Just pulled Clara into his arms and held her like she might disappear. Is it okay? Clara asked. That I'm pregnant. Okay? Rowan pulled back to look at her. It's a miracle. You're a miracle. They told the children at dinner. Nora's eyes went wide. A baby? A real baby? A real baby, Clara confirmed. Nora squealed and launched herself at Clara, hugging her middle. I'm going to be a big sister. You already are a big sister, Eli pointed out. A bigger sister, then. Eli was quieter. He looked at Clara with an expression she couldn't read. You okay? She asked. He nodded slowly. Yeah, it's just... This makes it real. That you're staying, that you're really part of the family. Did you think I wasn't? I always had this little voice in my head saying you might leave, that this was temporary. Eli's smile was shaky. But you can't leave now. You're having a baby. You're stuck with us. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I was stuck with you the moment I walked into your house. The baby just makes it official. Eli came around the table and hugged her. Actually hugged her, fully and without reservation. I'm glad you're my mom, he whispered. Clara held him and cried and felt something inside her finally, completely heal. The pregnancy was hard. Clara was sick constantly for the first 4 months. The summer heat made everything worse. She was exhausted and uncomfortable and miserable. But she was also happier than she'd ever been. Rowan hovered constantly, worried about everything. Ruth became an invaluable source of advice and calm. Nora talked to Clara's stomach daily, telling the baby about school and Sarah and all the things they'd do together. And Eli built a cradle. He worked on it secretly in Rowan's workshop, spending hours measuring and sanding and fitting pieces together. When he finally showed it to them, Clara burst into tears. It's perfect, she managed. It's crooked, Eli said, embarrassed. The right side's higher than the left. I messed up the measurements. I don't care. It's perfect. Rowan examined the cradle with a professional eye. You did good work, son. Real good work. Eli glowed at the praise. They set up the cradle in the bedroom Clara and Rowan shared. Clara would lie in bed at night, one hand on her growing stomach, the other reaching out to touch the slightly crooked wood. She had a family, a real family. One she'd chosen and one that had chosen her back. The baby came in early November, 2 weeks ahead of schedule and after 18 hours of labor that Clara was fairly certain might actually kill her. Ruth acted as midwife, calm and competent, while Clara screamed and swore and threatened to murder Rowan for doing this to her. You're doing great, Ruth said for the 100th time. I'm dying, Clara gasped. You're not dying, you're having a baby. Same thing. But then, finally, after what felt like an eternity, a baby's cry filled the room. It's a boy, Ruth announced, placing the tiny, screaming bundle on Clara's chest. Clara looked down at her son, red-faced and furious and absolutely perfect, and felt her heart expand in ways she didn't know were possible. Rowan was crying again, looking at the baby with wonder. He's beautiful, Rowan whispered. He looks angry, Clara said, but she was smiling. They named him James, after Clara's father. James Hale. A new beginning. Eli and Nora met their baby brother an hour later. Nora was enchanted, immediately declaring him the best baby ever. Eli was more cautious, but when James wrapped his tiny hand around Eli's finger, the 12-year-old's face transformed. "He's so small," Eli breathed. "You were this small once," Rowan said. "I don't believe that." Clara watched her family gathered around the cradle Eli had built, and felt like her life had finally come full circle. She'd stepped off a train broken and alone. She'd been rejected and judged and nearly destroyed. But she'd survived. More than survived. She'd built something beautiful out of the ruins. That first winter with James was chaos. He was colicky and loud and demanded constant attention. Clara was exhausted. Rowan was overwhelmed, and the whole house revolved around the tiny tyrant in the crooked cradle. But it was also magical, watching Rowan rock his son to sleep, seeing Eli gently help with diaper changes, hearing Nora sing lullabies she made up on the spot. This was family. Not perfect, not easy, but real and whole and theirs. One evening in late December, Clara stood on the porch holding James while he fussed. The first snow of the season was falling, soft and quiet. Rowan came out and wrapped his arms around both of them. "Tired?" he asked. "Exhausted. Regret any of it?" Clara thought about the question, about the train platform in Ridgemont, about the cabin and the threats and the impossible choices, about leaving everything behind and starting over, about this house, this family, this life they'd built from nothing. "Not for a second," she said. James chose that moment to stop fussing, settling contentedly against Clara's chest. Inside, Nora was practicing her letters while Eli helped with dinner. The house was warm and bright and alive with the sounds of living. This wasn't the future Clara had imagined when she'd answered Thomas's letters. It was better than anything she could have imagined, because it was earned, built through pain and perseverance and choosing love over fear. "I love you," Rowan said quietly. "I love you too." They stood together watching the snow fall, holding their son, while inside their children laughed. The woman who'd been left on the platform was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, braver, more whole. Someone who'd learned that sometimes the best thing you can do is survive long enough to find the people who make survival worthwhile. Someone who'd discovered that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who choose you when everyone else walks away. Someone who understood that dignity isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up every single time. Clara kissed James's soft head and let herself feel everything. The exhaustion, the joy, the gratitude, the peace. She was home. Finally, completely, home. And that was worth everything it took to get here. Years later, when people asked Clara about her life, she never told them about the humiliation in Ridgemont or the men with torches or running away in the night. She told them about the carpenter who offered shelter when nobody else would, about the children who taught her what family really meant, about building something beautiful out of broken pieces. She told them that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is accept help, that sometimes running isn't cowardly, it's survival, that sometimes the only way forward is to let go of what was and embrace what could be. But mostly, she told them this, that she'd been lost and she'd been found, that she'd been broken and she'd healed, that she'd been alone and now she never was. And in the end, that was the only story that mattered. The rest was just details.